getting words confused or mixed up in Qigong. I find this happens quite a bit with new students or even intermediate students. And does it matter? If it does matter, what can you do about it? That is going to be the subject of this episode of Chi Life. Okay, I'm here in Tbilisi in Georgia, which is in Europe or Asia, or maybe the border between Europe and Asia, depending on how you want to identify things. And I'm going to tell you a little story now. Bear with me, it does have relevance to the topic of this vlog. So on this trip I'm going to quite a few different places, quite a few different cities, a few different countries, teaching Qigong, doing Qigong healing sessions. I'm going to be going to a conference soon, and a few other things as well. So it's a reasonably long trip, about 2.5 months, and a few different destinations. So if you've been following this vlog, you will know that maybe a month ago, or just over a month ago, I was in Georgia, but Georgia in the United States. So when I was leaving on this trip, as is natural, I'd talk to people and people would ask me, oh, where are you going? And I would say Georgia, and then I would wait, see what their response was. And some people assumed that I was going to Georgia in the United States. A few people assumed that I was going here, Georgia, in Europe. And then only a very few people asked, oh, which one? And now I've only been in Tbilisi a few days, but everything here, from the food to the buildings, both old and new, and the language, everything here is a really unique experience and quite different from Georgia and the United States. And so if I hadn't then clarified with those people, and which I did, of course, because it was just a fun question for me to ask, because how many times do you get to go on a trip and say you're going to both Georgias on the same trip? So that was just a little bit of fun for me. So I did tell them, I'm going to both, and but how? If we had just left it there and they had assumed they knew where I was going when I said Georgia, and I didn't clarify it for them, they could have come to quite the wrong idea of what my experiences might be like. When I came back to New Zealand and I start talking to them about Khachapuri and Kinkali, they might just have no idea what I was talking about if they assumed I was in the United States. Now, that's not a big deal, really. It's probably not going to cause any problems, but it's quite easy to confuse words that might be the same or almost the same with each other, and this happens in Qigong quite a bit as well. Now, most of the time this isn't a big deal in Qigong either, because really Qigong is about the experience, it's about doing the Qigong. But the words that we use and how they direct our mind does have an influence on that practice. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. As I do this, I'll probably put up a few more shots of Georgia when it's when there's nothing else visually that I need to show you, just for some interest. Okay, so what are some examples of words that get confused in Qigong? Well, one of the first ones that happens quite a lot is the word Chi. So the Chi in Qigong, people get this one mixed up. Now, of course, Chi means energy, Gong means work or skill, so working with energy, developing skill with energy, a reasonably simple definition, simple to understand. But what do they confuse it with? Well, they often confuse it with Tai Chi. The Ji in Tai Chi. That's not the same word. But people can get confused about that and assume it's the same one, and this kind of misdirects their understanding and therefore their practice a little bit. So the Chi in Tai Chi it refers to pole or limit. And what it's referring to specifically is the movement between yin and yang. to be able to move harmoniously between yin and yang. Quite a different meaning. Another one that this one gets confused with, Chi is in Chi Sao or Chi Sao. It depends, and I'm going to talk about this later, exactly how you say it. This refers to sticky hands. So this is a practice used in Kung Fu styles. It's a partner drill used to develop sensitivity and spatial awareness, so you can know how to read your opponent and deflect and guard and find holes in their guard to strike and so on. Not quite the same meaning. Sticky doesn't really mean the same thing as energy. And I've seen fairly often people get all three of these confused with each other. Another one that gets confused sometimes, I'll give you a couple more examples. There's almost infinite room to get confused about different words in the Chinese language. So Bai Hui is a very important acupuncture point right in the center of the top of your head. And this is used, and awareness of this and concentration on this is used in quite a few Qigong practices. So Bai Hui means 100 meeting point. So the Bai means 100. But another common Chinese word, Bai, is white. That would be quite different if you thought it was white meeting point. Might kind of put you on the wrong track. Another one, Ren Mai. So this is the meridian or vessel which comes up the front of the body. Comes up the center of the front of the body, one of the extraordinary meridians. So this means what translates as conception vessel. But there's another word, Ren, in the Chinese language, which is very similar, which just means human or people. Again, the meaning's a little bit different. So, again, as I said, most of the time this doesn't cause too much problem in Qigong practice, but it can put someone slightly off track, and therefore they're not going to understand their practice quite as well. They're possibly not going to get quite the right benefit from their practice either, not understanding terms properly. I think with the Chinese language there are a few reasons in particular why it's particularly easy to get Chinese words confused with each other as a non-native speaker. One is the fact that historically there has been more than one different way of transliterating Chinese characters into English. So there have been several, but the two most common ones, one is Wade Giles, which used to be more popular quite a while ago, and then another one is Pinyin, and which is more popular now and is also the official way of transliterating into English and has been for some time. So really most of the time that's the one you should be using if you're wanting to reduce confusion in the future, so that everyone's doing it the same way. So for the word Qigong, in Wade Giles, Qi was spelt C-H-I, whereas in Pinyin it's spelt Q-I. And then to make that worse, when we get to something like Chi Sao, well, that's still spelt Chi, C-H-I in Pinyin. With Tai Chi, again, in Wade Giles, the G was spelt C-H-I, whereas now in Pinyin, the G is spelt J-I. And that makes it clearer that it's a different word. But because these different types of transliteration have been common at different periods, it's quite often to see if people are reading books, and even some people are still using the older form of transliteration, see both of these spellings in different places in different words, and that things that people have written. So it's very easy for people to become mixed up when they see Tai Chi and then they see Qigong, both spelling it C-H-I and not realizing that it's a different word. Another reason why it's easy for the words to become confused is actually about pronunciation. Now, don't use my pronunciation as the definitive guide by any stretch. I think I'll make another vlog about that in the future. But the Chinese language is a tonal language, and many Westerners are going to find it hard to get the pronunciation just right. They're going to find it hard to even hear the difference in pronunciation for some words. A lot of them will sound exactly the same, even though it's a completely different word. And then on top of that, there are quite different accents and dialects throughout China. And so in one part, they will say it sounding more one way, and another sounding more another way. And so that can leave a non-native speaker completely confused about what's going on. So all of these things make it, I think, relatively easy to get words confused. So I guess the next question is, what can we do about it? Well, one thing that's useful, when you're writing things, Chinese terms, I think it's helpful, again, to use pinyin most of the time, because that is really the official way and should really standardize to that. But also use the Chinese character, because often this clarifies it. You can see that the Chinese character for the different words are different, therefore it's different. So that's helpful. It's not a complete solution though, because again, to someone who's not learning how to read all those characters, that they're not really going to remember them, and then when they go to a class or something and they hear them being spoken, they're still going to be confused. But it's something that creates some clarity about the use of different words. Another thing that you can do that will help is to at least have your pronunciation somewhere in the ballpark. Again, as a non-native speaker, I think it's probably not realistic that everyone's going to get their pronunciation just right. I certainly know I don't get it just right all of the time, but to have it at least in the ballpark, make an effort to have it something like what the word should be. And then the last thing, and I think really this is the most important one, I think as much as possible you should really translate Chinese terms into your own language. For me that's English, but if I was Spanish or teaching Spanish people, I should really try to translate them into Spanish. Or I was just in Montenegro teaching workshops there, and so whenever we're teaching workshops we had a translator to translate into Montenegrin, because then it becomes clear the concept, hopefully, that you're talking about, rather than getting lost in the use of the word. I think sometimes people like to use Chinese words, and there's different reasons why you may want to use Chinese words. Part of it can be respect for the culture, that's awesome. Part of it can be as a shorthand way to describe sometimes quite a complex or deep meaning of something. And that's just a matter of practicality and specialized terminology. That's awesome as well. Just something that you practically need. But on top of that, I think sometimes people like to use them as a kind of pseudo-mysticism to make it seem like it's other. It's not. It's some foreign concept, and this somehow makes it more mystical. I don't think that's so useful. I think if anything that stands in the way of understanding. And I think with all of those reasons why people may use the Chinese terms, I think it's helpful to remember that even the Chinese terms don't fully describe the thing that we're trying to describe. They're just abstract ways to describe something that is beyond words, something that can really only come from experiencing. There's a little myth that raises its head from time to time where people sometimes say, oh, you can't possibly understand Chinese concepts without fully understanding Chinese language. I really don't think that's true. Because certainly it can help to have, the more exposure you have to Chinese language, not just Chinese language, but Chinese culture, you're going to be able to piece things together, for sure. But if the thing that's being referred to is not the word itself, if the word is just an abstract representation, then what we really need is things that point us towards understanding that deeper thing. And we should be able to do that in any language. Use whatever language is available to us to point towards that. Even using Chinese terminology, it will require explanation as to what that terminology means. So if we shift out of that terminology, or if we're using that terminology and we describe it in another language, it's okay to need to describe it, to maybe use sentences, whole paragraphs, whole conversations to get to that deeper thing that it's being described. So that's what we're really after, to really understand energy, how it functions inside us, how it functions around us, how we can work with it. And so from that point of view, the terms don't matter so much. They matter in the way that they direct our mind, but whatever terms we use to direct our mind, if it points us in the right direction, that's just fine. At least in my opinion, that's just fine. Because that's what I'm after, really understanding and working with the energy. So in the end, it doesn't really matter all that much if I say Chi, or if I get my pronunciation a little bit different, I go Chi, or if I say energy. As long as I understand what I'm referring to, as long as much as possible, I help those I'm teaching or working with to understand what it is I'm talking about. That's what we're after. So I hope this vlog has been something interesting for you, maybe given you something to think about in your Qigong practice and your Qigong study. I think it's really helpful if there are some words that you're not sure what they are, or you've taken them for granted. Maybe do a little bit of digging, find out what they are. If you're teaching regularly, maybe try to make sure that you're not making what you teach overly mystical or unnecessarily mystical. Maybe try to make sure that people get really good practical descriptions of the terms that you're using so they know how it applies. It'll help them to get more of that out of their Qigong practice. Okay, if you've enjoyed this vlog, found it useful, think other people might enjoy it too, I am hoping to reach lots of people with this. So if you can like, comment, subscribe, share, all those good things, that will be awesome. I look forward to seeing you on the next one.